This clip is brought to you by 8 Sleep Mattresses, the temperature-controlled Tesla of beds that automates your sleep. Sleep better and enjoy this clip.
But let me ask you this, and both of you guys, because people do mention the idea of setting expectations too high and then failing at those expectations, but isn't it good to just build a skill of reframing those failures? I mean, like, you can always course correct, so why not set some expectations? Curious about both of you guys' thoughts on that.
I think for me, a lot of my expectations are mental. I think it has been something growing up where I have just expected the worst of myself, that I couldn't accomplish something. So I would kind of just not do it as a reason to be like, well, I can't fail at something if you don't do it. So my mental expectation is that I apply myself as much as I possibly can. That's not really a tangible thing because you can't really look at a gauge and say, okay, I did at least like 80% of my expectations mentally. But I know that I can feel when I've really given myself to something. Like, I run a business and I know when I'm being a good boss for that day. Like, that's not an on paper expectation, but there are certain things, certain elements that I have to accomplish within that to meet that kind of expectation, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the expectation thing, I leave it kind of blurry a lot of times. And so that's why it's good for me to not have too much of an expectation in something, because I will, for some reason, and you see this a lot with kids, with little kids think they're awesome at everything. And they don't notice. David Weck actually mentioned this to me recently, where a friend of mine, he thought he was like the fastest kid. And then he remembers a day where he went to race somebody else and they beat his ass. And then he recognized not only is he not the fastest kid like in his neighborhood or his area, he's not even the fastest kid on his block because this kid just kicked his ass. No. You know, and he started kind of recognizing like, oh, I'm not as good at this, I'm not as good at that. So I think a lot of times people have a heightened view of what it is they're going to be able to accomplish, but it's not realistic because they're not actually really doing enough stuff in that particular category to actually be really good at it. So somebody might be really frustrated with the fact that they're not really getting better at running. And then you kind of ask them like, how often you're running? And they're like, well, I run like 2 or 3 times a month. I went to run last month and then my knee hurt and then my back hurt. And then they got back into it. And you kind of hear all this stuff and you're like, well, that just doesn't make any sense. So I agree with you, like reframing the way that you think about it, I think is probably the most important thing, because if you define your goals a little bit, if you define your goals a lot, then you can start to kind of write out or picture or envision the 7 or 8 different things that are associated with you reaching that goal. And if you do those 7 or 8 different things, you should be able to get to that goal. Timing wise, it might take a little longer than you may have expected, but you should be getting closer to that, and you should be feeling better about that continuously.
And I could be wrong about this, but I would assume, and Maddy, I'm curious about the same thing when it comes to you and wellness. Like you mentioned, you didn't set any goals when it comes to running. You're also new, but I'm assuming like, you know, towards the middle stages and towards maybe the end of your powerlifting career, both of you guys probably had set goals for numbers that you want to hit, whether you hit them or not, right?
So you start to, but it's, I've made this reference before, but it reminds me of the Mario Brothers. When you're trying to get as many points as possible, you know, with Mario to get on that flag, you got to jump at the right time. And if you don't make the jump at the right time, you get less. You only jump at the bottom of the flagpole, and you only get like 100 points. And so I think you have to know when is your jump off point, when is your jumping off point, and you have to do a lot of work to even have the jumping off point. Her and I were talking about this in the car with finances. Maybe somebody, she does a lot of online coaching and things like that. Somebody that wants to get started with that, it would be a great idea for them to probably continue their personal training job, seeing people in person until they made enough to make the jump to being like, now I only do stuff online because I don't want to take up the extra time with meeting people in person any longer. So that's kind of the way I view it. And same thing with powerlifting, with the numbers. You know, I'm not thinking about an 800-pound bench until I did something in the gym that was very clear, where not only was I going to bench 800, but probably a lot more than that. So it was, you know, it's not like I'm barely going to get it, especially the physical feat. I don't want it to be barely. I want it to be Same thing with like running a 6-minute mile is a goal of mine, but I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's like, it's out of ways. I can probably run like an 8-minute mile right now. But when I run a 6-minute mile, I don't want to fucking hit the ground and feel like I'm going to just keel over and not be able to breathe. I want to run the 6-minute mile pretty efficiently and be like, I feel pretty good. You know what I mean? I want to be able to recover from it easily.
And Nsima, what's your kind of process then when it comes to setting a goal and creating expectations?
I have no issue, I guess, having high expectations on things and failing at certain things. I don't look at necessarily not hitting a goal as bad, because if I set those goals for myself, right, and I plan things out and I do what I need to do, but let's say I fall a little bit short, I can always analyze why I fell short. It's like that's why I guess when it comes to things like this, it's like even at the beginning of something, right, where you don't necessarily know, like let's say jujitsu. Say you have a goal of winning worlds as a white belt and you just started. It seems like a dumb goal because you've never done jujitsu, you don't know aspects of the training, but okay, you set the goal and then you start with a kind of plan, but as you start with that plan, you course correct. You ask different people, what do you think about this goal? What do you think about what I'm doing? You fix things. Let's say that you don't get that goal, you don't win worlds as a white belt, but maybe let's say you podiumed, you analyze and figure out, okay, what do I need to do to course correct for another goal? Because you didn't hit that goal, you set your expectations a little bit too high, but at least you were moving in a direction, right? So, and I understand.
And sometimes I think we know so little about stuff that our expectations are crazy. Like,
oh yeah,
every little kid in the United States, not every little kid, a lot of little boys want to be professional football players. And then you start to kind of figure out like, oh man, like it's fucking really competitive. It's unbelievable to be a pro football player. And you just recognize over time, it doesn't really like hurt you. You just recognize over time, like, it's just not in the cards for me. I'm just not designed to go and do that no matter what efforts I put in. Or maybe you started your efforts too late towards that particular goal.
But I do understand what you're saying. Like, with running, as you get more experience, just like as you got more experience with powerlifting, you're able to, and you too, you're probably able to pinpoint things a little bit better because you have more experience. And we talk a lot about this when it comes to like losing weight. If someone's just starting a fat loss phase or just starting to go down that journey of getting healthier, they probably shouldn't say, I want to lose 30 pounds in the next year, because they don't know anything about dieting or the habits and the things that they need to actually do. And it takes a while to implement that. And especially when it comes to that, people tend to beat themselves up when they haven't hit body goals. So
I think that's the key factor is how you feel. How do you feel afterwards? And then you can figure out how you are going to act moving forward. Because if your expectations are really high for yourself and you feel like shit because you didn't reach it, then maybe you have to act differently than the way that you're suggesting. And if it doesn't bother you and you're able to like debrief yourself afterwards and say, well, maybe I should train at a different gym, or maybe if you can't be like analytical about it, then maybe you should act differently. But if you can handle that, then I think what you're suggesting is great.
Power Project family, we appreciate you checking out this clip. Check out another one. Just go check out another one. Or comment down below and let us know what you liked about this one. But we love you guys, and we're going to keep bringing you the heat. So comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff, okay? Peace.